Working alongside Christina at Brighton Startup, our next speaker, Chetan Padia, is also a huge supporter of the Brighton startup scene and works tirelessly to help drive investment into Brighton startups. A software engineer at heart, Chetan brings a lot of insight into what makes a successful startup scale and grow, and we couldn't think of anyone better to discuss with us today the future of startups in Brighton and Hove, identifying what we're really good at and why 2020 is the most exciting year for local startups.
Hi everyone, I'm Chetan, co-founder of Brighton Startup. Our mission is to drive investment into early stage companies in Brighton and Hove. If you're a business in Brighton right now, it's a really exciting time to be here, despite the current situation. It's becoming a more attractive place for investors, and there are a lot of things in the works that will be launching over the next few years, and hopefully I can give you a bit of a flavour of those today. So I'm here to talk to you about the future of startups in Brighton and Hove. What are we really good at already? What is Brighton and Hove really good at? Well, Brighton's known as a hotspot for sustainability, so sustainable products and sustainable organisations. It's also known as a very creative city, somewhere with a lot of music and art. For example, we have BIM, the music college, which produces a whole bunch of exceptional musicians. We're known as a hotspot for gaming, so Unity, who are a very big global company who make tools that game developers use, have one of their big offices based in Brighton, just by the train station, as well as employing a lot of people that work in the games industry. A lot of people come out of there and create their own games companies or games agencies. And then there's a sort of coming together of those things with the next generation of technology. So we're seeing augmented reality and virtual reality coming more and more to the fore, and we're seeing companies based around those. And Fusebox at Wired Sussex is a really good example of somewhere that's trying to help those companies capitalize. So Fusebox is an incubator scheme run by Wired Sussex that gives those companies office space and equipment and the contacts they need to be able to build out those sorts of companies. We have a lot of marketing and SEO and content-based companies. We have a lot of media companies too. And we're very much a hotspot of food, of sustainable food, of vegan food, and people trying new things in that industry that probably don't get tried elsewhere quite so early. So Brighton's a bit of a hotspot for businesses with purpose too. So where the sole purpose of the business is not just to make cash, but it's to, they have a mission that's bigger than themselves. And that's a theme we see actually consistently around Brighton. One of the interesting things, one of the reasons why so many companies do thrive here is because we have lots of agencies, lots of freelancers in terms of developers, in terms of marketing, in terms of content, and plenty more. So you've got all the skills you need locally to get your business off the ground. I mean, it's one of the highest educated cities in the UK, and that's why. So why is this year the most exciting year for local startups? Well, there's a trend of companies moving outside of London for a start. And you kind of think of London as being the place where startups start. But more and more companies are seeing that that's very expensive. They don't necessarily need to be located in London, and they don't necessarily even need to be co-located, which we're seeing more and more, obviously, given the current situation. So Brighton also has great transport links, so when they do need to travel, that is possible. So let's have a little look at what's already existed in Brighton. So we've got some incubators. I mentioned the Fusebox already, which is great for sort of next generation technical stuff. Barclays Eagle Labs are a sort of incubator more for kind of makers and creators. And then we've got the NatWest Accelerator, which is the only accelerator that's existed for the last 6 years. But in the next year, we're likely to see at least 2 more accelerators appear. So the big one that you might have heard of is PlusX. So PlusX is a co-working space, office space, and incubator and accelerator, which is partnering up with Brighton University, and they're out in Moulsecoomb. They were actually supposed to have their doors open already, but they had a few delays, and now, given that we're all locked in our homes, they've obviously had to delay that, but they're coming very, very soon. You one that a lot of people haven't heard of is one called Blue 14. So they're a content and e-commerce focused accelerator. Well, they will be an incubator and an accelerator scheme, and they're opening out in Kemptown. Also, co-working is, there's quite a few co-working spaces in Brighton. There's, the projects, there's Platform 9, the Works, the Skiff, but we're seeing more. There's talk of opening an impact hub in Brighton, and that's gaining some momentum, and I think that'll be really, really great. There's a co-working space called Wrap, which should be opening in the centre of town, and then there's more that we've heard of as well. So even though I think historically people have struggled to find office space in Brighton, we think that's going to change quite a lot, especially with the advent of more co-working, which is great to see. And a lot of those co-working spaces are providing more of a community and more of a support network for their companies too. On the subject of community, up until now we've had Wired Sussex has been the kind of go-to for tech companies and early stage tech companies especially. They've been the sort of main community. We've also got the Brighton Chamber, who are one of the most modern chambers that we've come across. But there's a lot of new activity and new communities being created. So firstly, the co-working spaces are creating their own communities that allow people, especially at the moment, to be connected digitally rather than in physical space, but also running a lot more events too. And then we have organisations such as the Good Business Club, which has only been running for just over a year, but in that year has seen amazing growth. And they're a networking community of businesses that have purpose beyond profit. Our prediction is that there'll be more and more of these communities opening up all the time, including this year, and there'll be more initiatives specifically to do with sustainability. What sorts of companies do we think will be opening more this year? Well, there's a whole host of them. There's more media companies, more marketing companies, there's more sustainability companies that we're seeing, and we hope we can give you a bit of a flavour of those. It's worth checking out our podcast, which I'll mention a little bit later. There's also a bunch of interesting new food companies opening up. So the ex-MD of Deliveroo is setting up a food market on the seafront, and that will be a great hotspot of exciting new food businesses too. And finally, hopefully that's creating so many more investment opportunities. So that brings me to what do we see are the big changes longer term? Well, even though office space is still scarce, we're seeing more co-working available and actually more room for people to start those companies, certainly the early stage ones. We're seeing a growth in communities, which I mentioned before, seeing just this sort of collaborative spirit really getting moving. And I think we'll see a lot more research-led companies as well coming from our local universities. So, for example, the Sussex Innovation Centre are part of Sussex University, and they take graduates' ideas and they help those graduates to turn them into companies. And we're seeing them being more actively involved in the community too, and getting those people the support that they need and access to the talent they need too. And then we see Plus X partnering with Brighton University, and what we hope to see there is a lot of the research that comes out of Brighton University, a lot of the final year projects and all those sorts of things being turned into companies that are then incubated by Plus X, who have all the support, resources, network to be able to accelerate those companies to get them running. And we've also seen the local council rethinking their strategy for investing in local businesses. So people often say that the local council don't do enough here, and actually we've definitely seen a shift in mindset of how the council are approaching investment in local companies. So hopefully there's a lot more to be seen there. So I hope you've seen that there's a number of communities, there's all sorts of different events and networks that can give you some support. It's worth joining them, even if we can't physically go there at the moment. The support that you get from those people is incredible. It's worth looking at Silicon Brighton, obviously. It's worth looking at Wired Sussex, especially if you're tech focused. It's worth looking at the Good Business Club, especially If you're in the positive impact space, it's worth also looking at the co-working spaces. So the co-working spaces, some of them are struggling to bring in a bit of cash at the moment, but they are still providing lots of incredible, valuable support to the local businesses and providing massively discounted rates for joining them. And there's also a lot of meetups currently happening online, but usually happening in person, obviously, as well. So I mean, I'm from the tech industry, and actually I'm just constantly surprised by how many tech meetups are happening in Brighton all the time, to do with different platforms, different languages, and all of those sorts of things. So one thing we've seen is it can be quite hard to find all these communities. So even though Brighton's densely packed with all of these different communities, sometimes it's quite hard to find them. So hopefully we've given you a bit of a flavour of what else is going on, and we'll continue to do that. But one of the things we really love about the people and the companies and the communities in Brighton is they have a very collaborative mindset. More collaborative than in other cities, I would say. I was talking to Carl, one of the people that runs the Skiff, which is the co-working space in the middle of town. And he was telling me about the difference in mindset he's seen here versus other things he's worked on before. So he started a co-working community in his hometown in Kent and found that people were quite competitive, actually, when it came to sort of setting up co-working events, co-working spaces. People were very, very competitive and actually almost didn't want to work together. Whereas working on something similar and working in similar communities in Brighton, he's found that actually people are very collaborative, want to help each other out, and I think we've really started to see the impact of that, and hopefully we'll continue to capitalise on that too. One of the things we like to do is highlight really exciting, successful, or up-and-coming companies in Brighton. So it's worth checking out the Brighton Startup Podcast, which is our podcast. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. There's a new series coming out now, which is specifically focused on the early stage, exciting companies that you might not yet have heard of. Head to our website, brightonstartup.com, to find local business resources, anything from accountants to recruiters. And if you're an investor or you're looking for investment for your company, do contact us. Our email's hello@brightonstartup.com. Thanks very much for having me. Stay safe and see you soon.